The Grant family lived in one of the most magnificent mansions on Hillcrest Avenue in Atlanta. The sprawling estate stood as a testament to Black success, with tall white pillars, a driveway lined with palm trees, and glass windows that reflected the sunlight like jewels. Jonathan Grant, the man behind the fortune, had risen from humble beginnings. Born to a single mother who worked as a cleaner, Jonathan had clawed his way up, starting with odd jobs before building a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire. But wealth changed his surroundings more than his heart. Jonathan remained humble, often treating workers with kindness. His wife, Vanessa, however, lived on a different frequency. She was born into privilege. Her father had been a wealthy businessman, and she grew up in luxury. To her, life was about appearances. She wore designer gowns even at breakfast and made sure her diamond bracelet sparkled whenever she lifted her glass. Working quietly in this palace was Tasha, a 23-year-old maid. Slim, dark-skinned, with kind eyes that carried both innocence and pain, Tasha had taken the job to support her younger brother in college. She moved through the house like a shadow, dusting the chandeliers, ironing clothes, and scrubbing the marble floors. Jonathan respected her diligence, occasionally asking about her family, but Vanessa saw her as invisible, unless it was time to criticize. One morning, as Tasha polished the silverware, Vanessa entered the dining room. "You missed a spot," Vanessa said sharply, pointing at a spoon. Tasha quickly wiped it again. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Vanessa tilted her head, her voice cold. "Sorry doesn't polish silver. Do better next time." Jonathan, who had just stepped in for breakfast, glanced at the exchange. His heart ached, but he stayed silent. He knew his wife's prideful nature, and confronting her too often only led to heated arguments. Still, he couldn't shake the discomfort. He had seen his mother endure similar dismissals when she worked as a cleaner decades ago, and the sight of Tasha bowing her head in shame felt like a memory haunting him. Friday night came with the soft hum of luxury cars pulling up the driveway. The Grant mansion was lit like a palace, chandeliers glowing through tall glass windows, and waiters in crisp uniforms moving about with trays of champagne. Vanessa had planned this dinner party for weeks. She wanted Atlanta's elite, business moguls, politicians, and celebrities, to know the Grants were still at the top of the social ladder. The dining hall glittered with gold-trimmed plates, crystal glasses, and a centerpiece of fresh roses that perfumed the air. Jonathan stood near the door, shaking hands and smiling warmly. He was a natural host, putting everyone at ease. Vanessa, dressed in an emerald gown with diamonds dripping from her neck, floated like a queen, her smile rehearsed and perfect. Meanwhile, Tasha worked silently, carrying trays of food to the long oak table. She moved carefully, balancing a heavy bowl of salad in her hands. Her heart raced. She wanted everything to go smoothly. But as she leaned to set the bowl down, a spoon slipped from her grip, clattering loudly on the polished floor. The room fell silent. Guests turned, forks frozen mid-air. Vanessa's face hardened instantly. "Can't you even carry cutlery properly?" she hissed, her voice cutting like glass. Tasha bent quickly, whispering, "I'm sorry, ma'am," her hands trembling as she picked it up. Her cheeks burned with shame. One guest, Mrs. Campbell, raised her brows and exchanged an uneasy look with her husband. Jonathan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. He wanted to say something, but he bit his tongue. He had learned that correcting Vanessa in public only made her more defensive. As the evening went on, Vanessa kept her eyes on Tasha, seizing every opportunity to highlight her mistakes. "Walk faster. Don't drag your feet like that. Pour the wine without spilling. Honestly, must I teach you everything?" Laughter from the table resumed, but Jonathan noticed the discomfort in their guests' eyes. What was meant to be an evening of celebration had been soured by humiliation, and the weight of it settled in Jonathan's chest like a stone. The main course had barely begun when Vanessa's sharp tongue struck again. Tasha, carefully carrying a jug of wine, reached to refill a guest's glass. Her hands shook slightly, She was still recovering from the earlier embarrassment. A few drops of red wine touched the edge of the glass, trickling down. Before the guest could say a word, Vanessa slapped Tasha's hand away. "Useless girl," she said loudly enough for the whole table to hear. "You'll stain the tablecloth with your clumsy hands." Gasps rippled through the room. The guest, a senator's wife, looked horrified. "It's fine, really," she murmured kindly, trying to soothe the moment. But Vanessa ignored her, still glaring at Tasha. Tasha's lips quivered. She swallowed hard, lowered her eyes, and whispered, "Forgive me, ma'am." She turned quickly, retreating toward the kitchen before tears could spill down her face. A heavy silence filled the dining hall. Jonathan's hand tightened around his fork. He wanted to defend the girl, to remind Vanessa that she was humiliating a human being, not scolding a child. But he remained quiet, his silence fueled by years of keeping peace in his marriage. One of the guests, an older businessman named Mr. Lewis, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Jonathan, your staff works very hard. Maybe the young lady is just nervous." Vanessa laughed lightly, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. "Nonsense. If she's nervous serving wine, perhaps she doesn't belong here at all. I demand perfection in my home." Jonathan's smile faded. His eyes lingered on the door Tasha had disappeared through, his heart heavy with guilt. He remembered his own mother, bent over office floors, cleaning quietly while enduring cruel remarks from wealthy employers. He had promised himself as a boy that he would build a world where no one treated workers with such disdain. Yet here he was, watching his own wife inflict the same cruelty. The laughter and chatter returned eventually, but the warmth of the evening was gone. Every guest had witnessed the humiliation, and every guest would remember it. When the last guest left and the mansion doors closed, silence filled the grand hall. The clinking of glasses and polite laughter were replaced by the echo of Jonathan's steady footsteps as he entered the bedroom. Vanessa stood before a gilded mirror, unclasping her diamond necklace, her reflection smug with satisfaction. Jonathan leaned against the doorframe, his hands buried in his pockets. His eyes, however, burned with quiet disappointment. "Vanessa," he began slowly, his voice low but firm, "was that really necessary?" She glanced at him through the mirror, arching a perfectly shaped brow. "Necessary? Jonathan, did you see how clumsy she was? Dropping spoons, spilling wine. She embarrassed me in front of everyone." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "No, you embarrassed her in front of everyone. There's a difference." Vanessa spun around, her emerald dress shimmering in the soft bedroom light. "Oh, please. She's a maid. That's her place. If I don't correct her, who will? Our guests expect perfection." Jonathan's face darkened. He stepped closer, his voice roughening. "She's not furniture, Vanessa. She's a young woman trying to earn a living. You didn't correct her. You humiliated her. That wasn't discipline. That was cruelty." Vanessa scoffed, tossing her necklace on the dresser. "You're being dramatic. She should be grateful to work here. Do you know how many girls from her neighborhood would give anything to serve in this house?" Jonathan froze. In that moment, his mind pulled him back to his own childhood. He saw his mother, worn shoes, rough hands, bent back, scrubbing the floors of offices where no one even said thank you. He remembered the sting of seeing her treated like she was invisible, or worse, disposable. He took a deep breath, forcing the anger down. "Do you know who else was once a cleaner, Vanessa? My mother. And if anyone had spoken to her the way you speak to Tasha, I would have wanted the ground to swallow me." Vanessa blinked, startled by the weight of his words. But pride clamped her lips shut. She turned back to the mirror, brushing her hair with cold strokes, refusing to admit fault. Jonathan shook his head slowly, walked out, and left her staring at her own reflection, one that suddenly seemed less flawless. Meanwhile, at the far end of the mansion, Tasha sat on the narrow bed in her small staff room. Her hands rested in her lap, still trembling from the night's ordeal. The humiliation clung to her like a heavy blanket she couldn't shake off. She thought of her younger brother, Marcus, sitting in his college dorm, books spread across his desk. He didn't know how many nights she cried herself to sleep, enduring cruelty just to keep him in school. Every insult she endured was another tuition bill paid, another dream secured for him. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was her best friend, Shonda. "Girl, I heard that woman gave you a hard time again," Shonda said, her voice sharp with concern. Tasha swallowed hard, her throat thick with tears. "It was worse this time, Shonda. She humiliated me in front of all their guests. I wanted to disappear, then quit. Tasha, you don't deserve this nonsense. You're not a slave." Tasha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I can't quit. Marcus needs me. His tuition, his books. I can't let him down. I'll endure. One day, God will lift me out of this. But until then, I have to stay." There was a pause on the line. Shonda's voice softened. "I just hate to see you suffer like this. You're worth more than they'll ever know." Tasha smiled faintly through her tears. "Maybe one day she'll see I'm more than just a maid." After hanging up, she whispered a short prayer, asking for strength. Then she lay down, her pillow damp with tears, and closed her eyes. But even in sleep, the sting of Vanessa's words echoed in her heart. A week later, the Grants prepared for a prestigious charity gala in downtown Atlanta. The ballroom shimmered with gold drapes, velvet carpets, and a stage adorned with flowers. It was the kind of event where powerful people mingled, exchanging smiles and handshakes that often carried million-dollar deals behind them. Vanessa stood before her vanity, slipping into a glittering silver gown that hugged her figure. Tasha, dressed in a simple black uniform, zipped her up carefully and adjusted the diamond clasp on her shoulder. "Make sure the car is ready," Vanessa said curtly, without meeting her eyes. "Yes, ma'am," Tasha whispered. At the gala, cameras flashed as Vanessa clung to Jonathan's arm. She smiled widely, greeting Atlanta's elite as though she were royalty. Yet, even in that dazzling hall, she carried the same coldness toward those she considered beneath her. Tasha followed discreetly, managing Vanessa's clutch and ensuring everything was perfect. The irony of the evening hung thick. The theme of the gala was lifting the underprivileged. Guests gathered to raise funds for scholarships and community programs for the poor. Jonathan's speech captured the room. "We must never forget where we came from. True success is not measured by wealth, but by how we treat others, especially those with the least power." The audience clapped warmly, moved by his sincerity. Vanessa smiled for the cameras, nodding in agreement. Yet the hypocrisy did not go unnoticed. Two women nearby whispered, unaware that Vanessa was within earshot. "Jonathan is such a kind man," one said softly, "but his wife, she treats that poor maid like dirt." "I know," the other replied. "Last week at their dinner party, she humiliated her in front of everyone. I couldn't believe it." Vanessa's smile faltered, the corners of her lips stiff. For the first time, she realized her cruelty was not hidden, it was visible to others, whispered about behind her back. Still, she lifted her chin, her pride unwilling to yield. Jonathan, however, noticed. As he glanced at his wife, a shadow crossed his face. He wondered how much longer he could remain silent. The following afternoon, the Grants hosted a brunch for close associates. The table was filled with laughter, mimosas, and freshly baked pastries. Tasha moved between the table and kitchen, serving quietly. As she leaned forward to pour orange juice, Vanessa snapped again, her voice sharp enough to cut through the cheerful chatter. "Don't you know how to pour juice without making it drip? Are you really that useless?" Tasha froze, her cheeks burning. She whispered, "Sorry, ma'am," and stepped back quickly. One guest, Mrs. Powell, frowned. She set down her glass and said, "Vanessa, perhaps you're being too hard on her. She looks like she's doing her best." The room fell quiet. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her smile brittle. "I expect excellence in my home," she said tightly, her tone leaving no room for argument. But the damage was done. Jonathan noticed how guests exchanged uneasy glances, their smiles dimming. The humiliation wasn't just directed at Tasha anymore, it was spreading onto Vanessa's own image. Later that day, Jonathan overheard one of his colleagues mutter quietly to another as they left the house. "She's beautiful and wealthy, but goodness, her heart is cold. No wonder Jonathan looks tired all the time." The words hit Jonathan harder than he expected. Tired. Yes, that was the right word. Tired of watching his wife belittle others. Tired of holding his tongue. Tired of remembering his mother's tears from decades ago and seeing them reflected now in Tasha's eyes. That night, Vanessa sat in bed, scrolling through photos from the gala. She noticed comments online, subtle but clear. Jonathan Grant, a man of humility. His wife, not so much. She set her phone down, her chest tightening. For the first time, her pride clashed with insecurity. People were noticing, and they weren't impressed. Still, she muttered to herself, they don't understand. A maid should know her place. Yet even as she said it, a tiny voice inside whispered, "Or maybe it's you who has forgotten yours." It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The sun streamed through the large windows of the mansion, casting soft golden light across the living room. Jonathan sat in his armchair reading the newspaper, while Vanessa scrolled through her tablet, sipping a glass of wine. Tasha had just returned from the store with groceries, carefully placing them on the kitchen counter. "Vanessa," Tasha called politely, "they didn't have the brand of orange juice you usually buy. I brought another one, but it's still fresh." Before she could finish, Vanessa stormed into the kitchen, snatching the carton from her hands. "Wrong brand again," she snapped, her voice echoing through the house. "Are you blind? Or just too stupid to follow simple instructions?" Tasha froze, her throat tightening. She had tried her best, yet it was never enough. Jonathan's chair scraped loudly against the marble floor as he stood. His tall frame filled the doorway, his voice booming with a force that shook the walls. "That's enough, Vanessa." The silence was deafening. Vanessa turned, stunned, her mouth slightly open. Jonathan rarely raised his voice, but when he did, it carried the weight of thunder. "She works hard every single day," he continued, his eyes blazing with anger. "And you treat her like dirt. I won't allow it anymore." Vanessa scoffed, trying to recover her composure. "Jonathan, she's a maid." "No," he interrupted sharply. "She's a human being. My own mother once worked as a maid, Vanessa. She scrubbed floors so I could have a chance at life. Do you think she deserved to be spoken to like this? Do you think Tasha deserves your cruelty?" Vanessa's face paled. She hadn't expected Jonathan to invoke his mother, a woman she knew he revered deeply. His words struck her pride, but also pricked something deeper, something she didn't want to admit. For the first time, Vanessa realized she wasn't just demeaning Tasha. She was trampling on Jonathan's past, his values, his very heart. The room remained heavy with silence. Tasha, clutching the hem of her apron, stood trembling, her eyes brimming with tears. She glanced at Jonathan, then at Vanessa, her lips parting hesitantly. "Sir," she began softly, her voice shaking, "I am grateful for this job. It pays my brother's school fees. It helps us survive. But I am also human. When I go to bed at night, the things your wife says, they don't just disappear. They follow me in my dreams. They cut into my heart." Jonathan's face softened as he listened, his chest tightening with empathy. Vanessa, however, stood stiff, her eyes narrowing. Tasha swallowed hard, summoning courage she didn't know she had. "Mrs. Grant, I serve with all my heart, not because I am less, but because I need this. But please, see me as a person. Not as a mistake. Not as trash." Tears slid down her cheeks as her voice cracked. "I am someone's daughter. Someone's sister. I am not invisible." The words pierced the air like arrows. Jonathan lowered his head, his fists unclenching slowly. He had wanted to defend her, but Tasha's bravery outshone anything he could have said. Vanessa shifted uneasily, her throat tightening though she tried to mask it. Pride told her to snap back, to dismiss the girl's words. But deep down, something stirred. For the first time, she heard not just a maid's plea, but a human cry for dignity. Jonathan's voice cut the silence. "Did you hear her, Vanessa? Do you understand now?" Vanessa turned away, unable to answer. Her reflection in the glossy kitchen cabinet showed a woman she barely recognized, a woman whose diamonds sparkled brighter than her compassion. Tasha wiped her tears quickly, bowed her head, and whispered, "Excuse me." Then she retreated to her small room, leaving Vanessa and Jonathan standing in the tension she had bravely broken open. That night, Vanessa lay awake in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. Jonathan slept beside her, his breathing calm, but her own thoughts refused to rest. Tasha's trembling voice echoed in her ears, "I am not invisible." She tossed and turned, pulling the silk sheets around her, but nothing could cover the unease pressing on her chest. For the first time in years, Vanessa felt exposed, not to society, not to cameras, but to herself. She remembered her childhood nanny, Miss Lorraine, an older woman who had once tied her shoelaces and sang lullabies when her parents were too busy attending parties. Miss Lorraine had been gentle, kind, and patient. Vanessa had loved her deeply. Yet somewhere between privilege and pride, she had forgotten what it meant to honor people like her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Vanessa reached for it and saw photos from the gala flooding social media. Comments scrolled under her smiling face. "Jonathan Grant is the definition of humility. His wife, not so much. Beautiful but cold. Money doesn't buy compassion." She slammed the phone down, her pride stinging. But beneath the sting was shame. Turning to Jonathan, she whispered, though he was asleep, "I'm not a monster, am I?" No answer came. Only her own conscience replied, "Maybe you are becoming one." Vanessa buried her face in her pillow, but tears still leaked onto the silk. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't crying from anger or frustration. She was crying from guilt. The following morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen where Tasha was quietly washing dishes. She hummed softly to herself, trying to rebuild her courage after the confrontation. Her hands were steady, but her heart still carried the weight of humiliation. Then she heard heels clicking across the marble floor. She froze when she saw Vanessa enter, dressed not in diamonds or silk, but in a simple robe. Her face looked tired, stripped of her usual armor of pride. "Tasha," Vanessa said, her voice softer than the maid had ever heard it. "Yes, ma'am," Tasha whispered, turning carefully, unsure what to expect. Vanessa hesitated, her throat tightening. The words didn't come easily. They tasted foreign. But finally, she forced them out. I was wrong. I treated you terribly. I embarrassed you in front of my husband, our guests, and I made you feel less than human." Her eyes flickered with something close to shame. "I'm sorry." Tasha's mouth fell open slightly. She blinked, wondering if she had heard right. Vanessa Grant, the woman who had barked insults like commands, was apologizing. "I don't know how to fix all the hurt I've caused," Vanessa continued, "but I want to do better. From today, I promise to treat you with respect. You're part of this home, too." Tears welled in Tasha's eyes. She wiped her wet hands on her apron and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know." In that moment, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just an apology. It was a seed of change, small, fragile, but real. Jonathan, standing silently in the doorway, watched the exchange with quiet relief. For the first time in years, he felt his wife's heart crack open. Change didn't come overnight, but it came. Vanessa began to soften. She no longer barked orders at Tasha. Instead, she asked politely. She started noticing the little things, the way Tasha folded clothes neatly, the way she always ensured the house smelled fresh with lavender. One afternoon, Vanessa approached Tasha in the garden. "How much longer until your brother graduates?" she asked. "2 more years, ma'am," Tasha replied. Vanessa nodded slowly. "Then I'll cover the rest of his tuition. Consider it my way of making things right." Tasha gasped, her eyes flooding with tears. She dropped to her knees in gratitude, but Vanessa gently lifted her up. "No, don't kneel. Not to me. Not ever again." Jonathan watched from the balcony, his heart swelling with pride, not because of wealth, not because of reputation, but because his wife was learning humility. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the mansion in gold, Jonathan held Vanessa's hand while they stood in the garden. "True wealth," he said softly, "isn't the money we flaunt. It's the dignity we give others." Vanessa leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes glistening. "And I nearly lost it all because of pride." At the doorway, Tasha stood smiling, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. Her whispered words floated on the evening breeze. "God truly lifts the humble." And from that day forward, the mansion on Hillcrest Avenue wasn't just a palace of wealth. It became a home where dignity and respect lived too.